hello again to the 5th International Queer Buddhist Conference. Now, we will have a workshop called Human Rights, Queer Rights All Over the World. And our beautiful presenter is Anuradha Gupta, AD, she, her. Anuradha Gupta, or Anu, is, now it's difficult for me, an AD, so AD is a NAMACB certified Ayurvedic practitioner from Kerala, Ayurveda, USA. I'm sorry for my English. She is the chapter president of the local FLAG chapter, and FLAG is the largest and oldest nonprofit in the US, working to create a just, inclusive world for the LGBTQ plus community. She's currently an adjunct faculty and AP mentor at Kerala Ayurveda with her own practice, Ayurvedic Footprints. Anu is an MBA, MMS, and 200 HYT. She is a prolific writer who has co-authored a book, Unveiling Health, Happiness, and Longevity, a primer on Ayurveda. Anu is an advocate for social justice causes, social justice causes and the LGBTQ plus community. She was part of the National Ayurvedic Medical Association's DEI committee, and her AD research at Kerala Ayurveda USA was on establishing culturally competent best practices for LGBTQ plus healthcare in Ayurveda, which she presented at GLMA Health Professionals Advancing LGBTQ plus Equity and NAMA's annual conferences in 2024. I really feel honored to have Anuradha Gupta. I'm sorry, I can't speak anymore. Anuradha Gupta, I'm really honored that you made it and you are here. Thank you. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. You are one of the few persons who says my name right. I am so happy. Thank you. So normally I shorten it to Anu. I am so grateful for this amazing conference that you have organized and, to accept my proposal and to have me here and to all of you at various time zones to attend. So I'll get started with my slides. I have prepared some slides. So I'm an educator. I do rely a lot on slides. Can you see them?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So, I'm talking about advancing queer rights across the world today. I am the chapter president of PFLAG Danville San Ramon Valley chapter. And, I want to start with a land acknowledgement that I speak from the ancestral and unceded territory of all indigenous peoples and native communities that were the original inhabitants of the lands where we all live and work. And I am grateful to the ancestors who fought for the rights and inclusion of marginalized minorities and LGBTQ folks, as today in the US, we start with Trans Awareness Month. Now, my story is that I'm an Indian immigrant to the US. I'm a Hindu, Buddhist, and Sikh in terms of my ancestry. My engineering school was the first to set up a GSA club in India. And I have spoken at many places. A lot of my advocacy has been person to person, family to family. English is not my native language. So I have an accent. Sorry about that. I'm the mom of an LGBTQ kid, and with my kid's permission, I have come out on her behalf. And then, because everybody is my kid, I have advocated for everybody for 15 years now, of which 4 are with PFLAG. And when I think about advancing LGBTQ rights globally, it's such a huge topic. So I thought I can get lost in the nations and, but where do we start? We start with self-reflection. And inclusion starts with the self. We think about learning our history, pre-colonization. We think about policy and representation, about education. Now, we do in PFLAG a lot of education work. We go to different organizations, even medical organizations, schools, you know, anybody who invites us and us in, we go to religious places, and then, we represent, we encourage representation. We talk about science. I'm sorry about the noise. We combat misinformation because there's a lot of it. We do advocacy in the government, we do advocacy in our communities, we support people, and we tie up with many nonprofits. We are ourselves a nonprofit. I'm a volunteer. I do have, a list of international organizations and programs, but world peace starts with individual peace. Inclusion starts with each one of us. Now, we've done a lot of partnerships in our community, a lot of storytelling, and we have found that storytelling is one of the most important tools that we have, because when people hear our stories, that melts their heart. They see us as real people. And, so this is how my structure is too. Even so, I thought, from nations to laws to stigma, where do we start? Now, the laws that impact LGBTQ people, they are related to employment and healthcare and education and housing, and dignity, and same-sex unions, and the very aspect of identity. Now, in the US, for instance, there have been executive orders trying to erase uh, you know, trans and gender diverse people and intersex people. And so we are fighting at every level. And I know we use the word fight, but we are doing it in solidarity and peacefully. And that is PFLAG's slogan is, we are leading with love. We read with love, we lead with love. Everything that we do is with love. Our love is louder. So, the laws, there are so many. I listed them, whether it's same-sex parenting or anti-discrimination or anti-bullying, in schools, bathroom bills. We are fighting for bathroom bills. I was in the Capitol a few months back, fighting for facilities, the military service, and then, so there are so many laws, and you'll get lost in them. So I'll move on. So let me get back. Yes. Now, I would like to know which nation you think is the best for LGBTQ rights and why. And you can chat with me in the chat, or you can unmute and tell me. Would you like to do that? Anybody? Yes, go ahead. You're muted, Jampa. Sorry, Dr. Jampa, you're muted.
Sorry. Yes. As far as I know, it's the best seems to be Spain in Europe, and once it was mentioned the island of Malta, also in Europe.
Yeah.
And maybe Iceland. But
yeah, Iceland is great. Yes. Netherlands too, right? They actually got a gay prime minister recently, right? So absolutely, Malta is great. Spain, a lot of these European nations, and I believe Mongolia is good. I don't know. I haven't investigated, but I would love to. So I know that they do a lot of meditation. We have a lot of meditators there, but so I was thinking of doing a quiz, but I I think we'll skip that. Would you like to do a quiz?
Miriam also put her hand.
Oh yes, please, Miriam, please.
I heard about Taiwan in Asia. I think that's and I think they have a very good Buddhistic community somewhere with a very progressive program by one Buddhist, what is it, priest or whatever. Yes. And by the way, in the Netherlands, even the princess is allowed to marry a woman. And that's kind of a very weird situation, because she can't have children on her own then. So,
right.
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. How powerful,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, Germany is not bad. Also, someone is saying, right? I don't want to
We're
mispronounce your
living
name.
here, so when it is painful, it's always the personal pain louder than
No, 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 no. That's not. No, no, that's
no,
not true, Miriam.
no.
Germany
Considered
has changed in the last year. Last year, we were so happy to have this self-determination law. So, for example, I got my name Jumper legally, and also my gender legally. So with the X, so I never can go on the Route 66 to the US because I don't exist for the US administration. Yeah,
may
but
I add something? Today they're in the news because it's written that 22,000 people since the law was changed just a year ago have take the chance of changing,
yeah,
and they were reckoning actually about 4,000 a year.
yeah.
Can you imagine what there is a difference?
That's right. But meanwhile, we have a new administration. This is a right conservative administration looking for the voices of the right wings of the alternative for Germany, what is not an alternative at all, because they are fascists. So, and the thing is that in the beginning of 2026, this administration, this conservative administration, they want to evaluate the self-determination law. What means they want to change it. And they also want what is openly spoken from those conservatives. They want to have pink lists like in the Nazi time. And that is really scary. So
No, that is very, very scary because in the US too, like you said, gender markers on passports and legal documents, that's something that is being evaluated because the Trump administration actually said that there's only male and female, and that doesn't make any sense scientifically. So we are trying to combat that with science. We go organization to organization doing a gender 101 training. We start with intersex identities, then we talk about how gender is not binary and whether it is, in faith-based settings where, in Buddhist settings, it is so so important for people to self-reflect and then figure out their identity, whether it's through that or, in the Hindu setting, we talk about, look, pre-colonial times, it was like that. In churches, we talk about how compassion is most important and supporting people and kids. So I think and someone has said, that New Zealand seems to have a lot of positives and it's illegal to discriminate. And Germany, yes, so we had that whole discussion thanks to you. So, what we found was the power of storytelling in securing rights is really important. So I wanted to play a YouTube video. So if I do that, I think I have to somewhere enable sound. How do I do it? Can you hear my sound?
I can
No,
hear you, but yeah.
not my sound. Okay, so I think I have to go
Um,
on mute. Somewhere there is you know, and I've done this once, share computer sound. Okay.
okay.
Now can you hear me?
Ah,
Yeah? Can you hear? Can you hear this now when the YouTube video?
no, it's
LGBTQ person. Yes, now you can hear? If okay, let me try again.
Yeah, of course. So,
yes.
Yes? Okay, all right. Okay, so this is my own kid, when we were doing a training series, we wanted to do some storytelling. So I started with Gender 101, and this is my
Just to
kid.
start off, I knew from a pretty young age that I was queer or a lesbian, like a lot of other queer people. Clearly, I've been blessed with very accepting, loving family and parents. For those of you who haven't made the connection yet, Anu of PFLAG is my mom. So I got just about as lucky as any queer kid could get. But of course, that doesn't mean that society is as accepting, unfortunately. And even if you have the most accepting parents in the world, or even if you have queer parents, coming out and figuring out how to navigate your identity in a world that is still unfortunately oppressive as the majority is a difficult personal journey for most. Especially growing up, there wasn't much queer South Asian representation. I remember seeing my community as the butt of jokes in many Bollywood movies, as one example. And while that's slowly starting to get better, South Asian culture and society in general still feels pretty far behind. I'm really lucky now that I'm out safely and I have an amazing partner of almost 3 years, even though we still have to be careful and aware of our surroundings in public, even in a liberal place like California. And I really want to recognize and emphasize that despite my own struggles that I, like many other queer youth, have experienced, I have a lot of privilege. Privilege in my class, in my cisgenderness, in my caste, my location, and more. But I think it's just really important to note that these systems of oppression, of homophobia and transphobia, white supremacy, capitalism, etc., are not only upholding these privileges, but also the structural violence that so many queer people face. Sorry, that was a little tangent.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really valid. So, and I'm so glad, to have you as my kid. When Himadri came out, I was just so shocked that anybody would have trepidation. Does any, so-called straight person go and tell their parents, I am straight? And that made me really upset that anybody would have trepidation. So anyway, so Himadri, I have another question for you. So so you did mention a little bit about the intersectionality between, South Asian and LGBTQ communities. You spoke of your experience. Thank you, Shailaja. So do you want to expand on that? Like, maybe from the experience of other people?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit more just about the larger intersectionality between South Asian and queer communities. First off, both communities and the intersection of those communities are so vast and diverse. There is no one South Asian culture, there is no one queer experience, and oftentimes only certain subsets of these communities are centered. So it's important that we uplift marginalized voices and not just the mainstream voices. But still, it's clear that so many members of the queer and South Asian communities face so many cultural and societal stigmas, which I've seen not only in my personal experience, but also in the research and in statistics. And from my experience, I can really only speak on, queer South Asian people in the US, and especially those of first generation South Asian immigrants. But that doesn't mean that the laws and cultural attitudes from our home countries don't affect us in the South Asian diaspora. Like Anu mentioned, in so many South Asian countries, our identities are criminalized and our marriages and identities are, not legalized, and our existence is looked down upon. In my research for this talk, I found a study that was done in 2014, which showed that 85% of Pakistani people and 67% of Indian people perceived homosexuality as morally unacceptable. And I hope we've come farther since then, but sometimes it doesn't feel like it. And even here in the US, so many South Asians struggle to find acceptance in their families who often have more traditional values, which studies show make this population even more prone to experience anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts. And this population is also culturally less likely to reach out for mental health support as well. And this is especially difficult because in our communities, our families are such a huge part of our lives, even when we get older. Personally, I have queer South Asian friends today whose parents are trying to get them arranged arranged heterosexual marriages, and who know that they can never come out to their family safely and be accepted. But that's why conversations like these are so important. I'm really glad to see that there's more events and trainings like these that are raising awareness. Even at South Asian Store last year, we collaborated with Desi Rainbow for our member organizations, but we really have a long way to go. And for myself as a queer South Asian person in this space, personally and professionally, I want to keep making more space for these conversations, not just around the challenges and difficulties, but also of the pride and joy of our intersectionalities.
So, this was a storytelling that we've used a lot, and a lot of South Asian families have used to tell their, kids have used to tell their families. And then we've done trainings, we've done podcasts, which people have used. We've talked about, pre-colonial times there. So I think we found, we tried a lot of things, but we found that I am trying to find my presentation again. Please bear with me. I'm not technically managing to do that. Okay, so I want to move beyond that.
Yes, absolutely. And,
yeah. And I found it. Yes. Seek and you shall find. So, all right. So, a little bit about PFLAG. PFLAG is one of the oldest organizations in the US. And we were started by a mom whose kid was beaten up during the Stonewall riots. And then now we have 350 chapters and 325,000 members. And some chapters we have in Germany and not Germany, I think in Canada and some other countries, some Asian countries. So it's interesting. And we work through education. So we, like I said, we do any module. People will ask us how to support your kid when they come out, or they'll ask us how to be an LGBTQLI, or in the schools, what are the laws? The teachers will ask, the counselors. We make that presentation to them. We have a training cell, and that is the strength of. So this is our local chapter. Grassroots work is so important, and then support. We have support meetings every month for families and LGBTQ people. And then we do advocacy, whether it's, local level or state level or in our school boards, where people may talk about banning books, or people talk about, we don't want to celebrate Pride. We don't want the Pride flag. And we show up. So we are there for our LGBTQ loved ones with the slogan, "Our love is louder." Now, we all talked about how the US has regressed. Basic freedoms are missing in 29 out of our 50 states. And this was during the Biden administration, when there were many anti-LGBTQ bills being introduced. So it was like a far-right movement, which was well funded, and these were copycat bills. So we knew this was coming. And, we were trying to prepare strategically. We just didn't know that there would be such a huge far-right win. And I think that's what different nations, you were talking about, even in Germany, what different nations are encountering. Back in India, we have a conservative government. So it's, when a government, when the people pick a far right government based on their stances, what do we do? How do we combat fascism? And we've done a lot of research on this, and we found it is storytelling, telling people. So, we were at our Rotary Club, and honestly, it's a very white conservative place, but they were just so moved because we had a trans, treasurer who spoke to them from the heart about their story, and that moved them. So we know that, Rotary Club does so much service. They know these are good people. They see us. Now, in 2025, what have Trump tried? They spent so much money, the administration. So we filed a lawsuit, PFLAG, and, it's been lawsuit after lawsuit. We are fighting. And there's the mental health cost of it. But there are so many attempts that they are making, and we know that they will not succeed. It does take its toll. So we are there. And, there are 616 anti-LGBTQ bills. So our chapters are fighting them, and our partner organizations, we are fighting them in court. We are, meeting with policymakers. We are meeting with families who are, so like, there was in one of our schools, there were these Indian moms who were anti-LGBTQ because of misinformation. So we went and spoke to them. There was a school board election where we had a candidate forum because we wanted people to know that, while we are supposed to be non-partisan, we had a candidate forum asking questions about LGBTQ rights. So, 70 laws have been enacted in 22 states already. What we see is that a lot of LGBTQ kids are attempting suicide or die by suicide. And that is what we are trying to avoid. We are trying to support mental health. Even the Trevor Project in the US, which works with the youth, that has had to step up because the 988 suicide helpline cut its funding for competent healthcare competent folks for LGBTQ kids. The community faces a lot of violence. So many kids are rendered homeless. And so, sometimes we feel hopeless. That is when we reach to the community, we reach to our faith, we reach to our sense of resilience, right? There's so much discrimination sometimes that we face, but, and so we have every possible conversation. We had a national conference and we said, okay, are spaces too white or Christian? And we found that they are. So, we examined the impact of BIPOC representation and we said, we need other faiths represented. We need other communities so people don't slip through the cracks. We talked about intersectionality. So, if somebody is South Asian and LGBTQ, they could be discriminated against. If somebody is Buddhist and LGBTQ in the US, right? If somebody is elderly, they could be discriminated against, and so on, right? So we talked about all these factors. And then I tried to analyze, like, 1% of US adults identify as Buddhist. Now, for me, because advocacy, starts in my nation, and then of that, 56% currently are Asians. So, we tried to look at the Asian community. So AANHPI, it's not a monolith. And, there are some people that are from India. There are some people that are from Taiwan, like you said, that's progressive. There are also some people from Afghanistan. They are native Hawaiians, where Hawaii has terrific human rights, and it has a huge Buddhist community too, Pacific Islanders, right? So we examined that, and we found that, Pacific Islanders and trans and gender non-conforming folks, they are the folks who face the hardest adversities. And, so now we know, okay, these are the people we have to, start with. These are the people we have to focus on. While we focus on everybody, right? It's like the LGB people, we are fighting for the T, right? So no LGB without the T. That is our slogan right now. As far as culture goes, we try to examine in the Asian people, many are raised Buddhist or Christian or Confucian or Hindu or Islamic or Sikh. Many of these faiths before colonization accepted and affirmed the LGBTQ community. But the traditionally non-affirming faiths, like the Victorian, more Christian faiths, they now focus on spiritual values like compassion and love. So locally, I work with Danville Congregational Church, which has a social justice arm, which is LGBTQ inclusive, which has a priest who is married to a Black man, right? So he's just amazing. So and they come under the umbrella of United Church of Christ. And, so we've been tracing these movements, like some people are moving from a Buddhist church to United Church of Christ. Why is that happening, right? And then somebody who's Hindu is trying to lean into, if I study Hindu mythology, I know that, there was a lot of, LGBTQ affirming, trans affirming, there were stories. And then for me, as a traditional medicine practitioner, I did a whole research where my research was not just on, best practices. I said, okay, let's see 5,000 years back, how were things, right? So we wondered whether, what happens in Buddhist spaces. And I found this beautiful 2014 seminar in Berkeley, and I love, because I love data. So, but I was also thinking that Buddhism, this is, I read, we are not defined by the gender binary. Gender diversity reminds us to let go of our rigid views and see human experiences with clarity, introspection, and compassion. Sorry, there's a typo, right? Of non-self. So, in advancing LGBTQ rights, we think of self-reflection, and then for us it's it's George Takei, who grew up as a Buddhist, who had a same-sex marriage in 2008. And he talked about, in this seminar, he talked about a Sunday school talk, where the church used a metaphor of the vastness of the ocean. We are all part of the ocean, and the currents and forces create a wave, and we are that wave, saying, I am me, I am an individual, I am an ego. And after that brief moment when we are asserting ourselves as a wave, we fade back in the oneness. I think this is what informs his attitude towards social justice and inclusiveness, towards getting rid of these barriers. And the basis of Buddhist inclusiveness is self-reflection. That is what Reverend Kuwahara, said, I think at this conference. We must humbly examine our biases. So, very often when we do trainings, I do a DEI training for my students, in Ayurvedic students, I tell them, examine your bias. All of us have some biases, and when they are unconscious, they impact our behavior. But we need to be conscious, so that and where does consciousness come about? In the Vedic tradition, we say it comes from meditation. And when we meditate, when we are self-aware, then we know, this is not me, this is not my this is my bias, right? And eventually nothing is me, right? And everything is me. So using faith is important. In Hinduism, we lean into one world family. In Buddhism, we want to alleviate dukkha. We don't want, right? In Islam, especially, we talk about the Sufi tradition, which is in Christianity. There are a lot of churches now that are affirming reform Buddhism. Judaism is largely affirming. So, and then other faiths, right? So, in advancing LGBTQ rights, we often talk about pre-colonial history. So, the two-spirit Native American folks. We talk about, how there are, and and I'll talk more about the, third gender in India and other communities. But it was colonization which led to stigma and criminalizing LGBTQ identities for many of the nations. 65 nations criminalized being LGBTQ, of which 29 are former UK colonies. Section 377 was what UK imposed. And, today, Taiwan and Nepal have legalized same-sex marriage. And then, India, it was because of the British that, same-sex unions were criminalized. And then in 2018, there was decriminalization. Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India recognized the third gender. And then, Pacific Islanders, again, there is the Quaker Church. Yes, absolutely, is inclusive. The Pacific Islanders, a lot of them have decriminalized, but gender identities, even though pre-colonization they were honored, they are still marginalized. And Hawaii, of course, is beautiful, birthplace of same-sex marriage and, gender fluid Mahu community. So a lot of people say we don't fit into this box, of LGBTQ. Our identity is different. In India, we have the Tritiya Prakriti, the Hijra, Kinnar, then, Two-Spirit, and then the Mahu community. So there are different third gender communities. In terms of religions, we see, our temples in India, there are so many depictions of every possible, sexual orientation. And yes. Thank you for, I'm seeing the chats, I'll come to them, right? So in our history, in China, in Japan, there was a Buddhist sage, I believe, right? You all know better, Kukai, who said same-sex relationships are ennobling. And then Vedic times, this was my research, which I presented. Leaning into science and research helps with human rights. And, when it is gender-affirming care, which is under attack in the US, it's all the medical organizations, it's all the research that we cite when we are fighting. And then there are the stories. There are the stories of families that go and talk about, their kids who have done better. But my research showed that there was 50 plus LGBTQ identities, which were affirmed in India 5,000 years back. And this is medical texts, this is, a Vedic text. These are epics and stories, and they were trans and lesbian and homosexual, gay men, bisexual, intersex. So where is the discrimination? Now, in advancing LGBTQ rights, when we talk about advocacy, international advocacy, there is the United Nations Human Rights Organization. There's government reform that we are hoping for. Representation matters. Now, to give you an example, in Danville, which is a red town, right? So for us, red is Republican. And it was very anti-LGBTQ. We found one person in the government who has a queer kid, and we started working through her, and we worked through the school system, we worked through the kids. Somehow we worked through Danville Congregational Church, because it is 60% Caucasian. So it's strategic. Government reform can come through one person. And finally, we don't mind if the mayor is performative and comes for our pride just to get a picture. But that means a lot to the community. So we find ways. Representation matters. If there is somebody who's like in our, so we have another town where actually when during Pride, one of the council members came out as a sexual, and we were like, more power to you, right? So, and then policy reform is important. So for policy reform, we have Equality California, whom we work with, and then they tell us about different bills, and we are there, advocating in person, or, we write letters, we write stories. Legal reforms are important through nonprofits. Grassroots organizations work very hard, like ours, and we have partners. So we set up a diversity coalition because somebody used the N word. And, so in 2017, it was so horrible. So we realized in our schools, there was graffiti. And so a diversity coalition that we work closely with. So PFLAG, then we work with the South Asian organization, because there are so many Indians, but no representation. The kids come to us, but not the families. And again, the laws, we have to be careful how we work with kids. So then, I did talk about, storytelling, and then public engagement. That is very important. So, sometimes we'll have a forum. Now, in the European Commission, I was reading that they have some strategic objectives they had set up for LGBTQ people, ensuring safety, tackling hate, countering online discrimination and hate. We have a lot of doxing that happens, right? People's identities get doxed, and ensuring protection for immigrants. That's another thing. Like, US had a lot of protections for immigrants. Right now, we are just struggling. We are, nonprofits are struggling. Laying the foundation for empowerment starts with employment, social inclusion, equal rights across borders, which US was working for once, and then strengthening engagement within EU, within nations, and worldwide engagement of LGBTQ human rights. So we have a Harvard Kennedy Global LGBTQ Human Rights Program, where there's training, leadership development, research into what is happening, and then they have conferences and partnerships. Before the Trump attack on LGBTQ rights, Biden administration was very inclusive, and they said, we want to end violence and discrimination for the LGBTQ community. We want to advance human rights. So I picked their model because they said, let's combat criminalization. That's, fundamental. Let's protect vulnerable refugees and asylum seekers. We had a lot of asylum seekers. Now our people, trans people, are fleeing to Canada and other nations, and all to better states. But it's not always easy. We are raising funds. Somebody's moving to California from Texas, right? And then foreign assistance to protect human rights. There's a whole organization looking at that. So, swift US responses to human rights abuses, like what happened in Uganda. and a coalition of like-minded nations and international organizations. This was what they thought. Now, I'm thinking of another extreme. In Uganda, 2023, we know the Anti-Homosexuality Act made headlines. And, they mandated life imprisonment, even death penalty. Ghana followed, and then Nigeria followed, so but the politicians boast that they are shielding people from Western immorality. That's not true, because LGBTQ people have always been there for thousands of years. And pre-colonial Africa was more fluid than Victorians can comprehend. It was not, a utopia. Egypt was so affirming. There is a movie called, and I know the producer, Beirut Dreams in Color, and it's about this, this LGBTQ advocate who was tortured in Egypt and finally, got asylum in Canada. But I think because of the mental health impact, she died by suicide. So, those were tragedies. But, uh, it is important that when we talk to different nations, or we talk to people in different nations, or like to communities, we talk about, look, this was how you were. If you think that you are, you are leaning into Western so-called immorality, that's not true. After all, torturing an advocate, how is that moral, right? So this is the so-called morality of colonizers, and you are upholding it. But resistance has resurfaced. And how has it resurfaced? 2019, Botswana decriminalized gay relationships. Angola followed suit. Namibia recognized same-sex marriage in 2023. So there are activists challenging people, and then there are artists, and there are storytellers, and then pride gatherings are happening. And I love this, this journalist said, true decolonization will emerge from rejecting colonial morality that instilled fear in us, not from dismissing queerness for the sake of culture. Our freedom has always been within us, only ever forbidden, but never destroyed. And this resonated with me, because the freedom for me is, moksha. When I drop all those identities of, or when I drop all those misconceptions, conceptions, so on, I am free. I am free to love. I am free to be. And, I am free to affirm other people when they be. Now, representation matters. Netherlands just elected a 38-year-old prime minister on October 29th, and he beat a far-right candidate with an anti-immigration stance. And then this is a Buddhist priest, you all know, right? So Japanese Buddhist monk, Kodo Nishimura, yes. And I've seen them, and I just love, depicting him like this. I'm not sure what his pronouns are, but this is what I read, that he uses he, and he says he's gender gifted because he releases himself from the box of man or woman, right? So this is beautiful. Now, representation matters for us in nonprofits also. So there was an Indian woman who set up, a woman of color who led an LGBTQ organization in the US during AIDS crisis. And she is the aunt, Urvashi Ved, of Alok Menon, a very famous non-binary poet. And then, this is a Pakistani man, Faisal Alam, who set up Al Fatiha Foundation. So in different faiths, the representation matters. So in advancing LGBTQ rights, I told you what we do. So our local governments, what they did was, this year on Jan 20th, when Trump was being sworn in front of our city hall, they gave us the MLK Day Award. So MLK, Martin Luther King Award for, for furthering diversity, inclusion, equity, and belongingness in our cultures. So it's because we do all this education work, advocacy work, support work, and it's not without risk. Like last year, I had great personal risk from a politician. I'm still on her page. How does it matter? I am unafraid, right? So she there was a lot of maligning, and you just hold fort because it's basic human rights and dignity you stand for. If you stand for something that is right, how can anything harm you? So, uh, there are so many things. Whenever I feel distressed, I meditate. So, in advancing human rights, the other thing I wanted to talk was about our stories as immigrants, right? A lot of us just want to keep our head down in the US. People get deported, they are worried about it. This is ICE, which is, they are trying to deport a lot of people get bullied. But so those of us who have privilege, and I know I have privilege, I use my privilege, right? So I'm a citizen. So I wanted to tell you a story of an Afghan man who came to us. He was a trans man. He came to us with his sibling because he said, uh, you remind me of your auntie. Right? So as an Indian, they look for an auntie, right? They see, and then the brother was very upset. The brother kept using their dead name. The brother said, oh, I liked him better with long hair. I liked his name better. And then he mentioned family honor. Now, when you say family honor, like, it's dangerous, right? When I worried about the kid, could something happen to the kid? Now, what would you do? So what happened was the kid, what they did was the kid told me, I'm not LGBTQ anymore. So young trans man, I was heartbroken, right? So I was, okay, I'm glad you trusted me. I'm not going to talk about this. I will not share with anyone. And then I asked a therapist, what can I do? I asked some, domestic violence organizations. They said you can do nothing unless they report it. So then what we started doing was we started doing trainings with domestic violence organizations. We thought somehow, indirectly, somebody will benefit. And, we were part of the domestic violence proclamation. We waited and prayed, right? Honestly, I prayed, right? Not as a community, but we just sent the best wishes. And then he came back to me. He said, I thought I could distance myself. I wouldn't be harmed. How can you distance yourself from who you are? And I realized that now detransition is death. I know that even if the worst happens to me, I will endure and confront the world as myself. I've come such a long way to be here at this place of acceptance and love for who I am. And I do not want to be the one who will try to take this away from me. Talking to other trans men like myself and my therapist helped me understand I was hurting myself by trying to be someone I am not. And then, he thanked me, and I was like, I took a breath. So, again, coming to storytelling, a PFLAG chapter leader who had mixed race kids. So he's Caucasian, and he's married to a Japanese Buddhist. He's a Caucasian Christian. And he said, in the West, we live with some amount of guilt and innocence, individualistic living. But in the East, there is a concept of honor and shame, also a family duty and community living. So his kid felt like, I'm not white, I'm not Japanese, even I am LGBTQ, but I don't quite fit in there. So, how do we include them? And then, so he's set up these affinity groups, and inclusion is the way of peace and love, right? So, what do we do to foster inclusion? That is something we need to ask ourselves every day. For us, we do grassroots work with the Asian community to understand intersectionality, because the Trevor Project actually said that Asian kids, 1 in 10 are because of their immigration status, they are discriminated against, or they were not out to parents. So this is the intersectionality of being Asian or mixed race, right? So to be LGBTQ, right? So we studied the resistance factors, especially in our cultures, right? And we tried to analyze. A lot of people in our cultures worry about saving face, losing face, or may not be educated, or religion is used as an excuse, or they fear rejection. Kids fear rejection, and people will say, "What will people back home say?" Right? They will not seek counseling. Sometimes language is a barrier. Sometimes there are financial issues. Sometimes it's the patriarchy in our culture. then it's lack of positive representation. But if we can connect with the cultural background pre-colonization, we found that it helps. And a lot of these kids were accepted by their friends. So, in our grassroots work, you saw we talked a lot to other organizations. We did other trainings. We got kids involved. We didn't record some of those for safety's sake, but we got so many kids involved. We had conversations and told our stories. So what we discovered in our grassroots work, we need affinity groups, maybe a Buddhist group, maybe a Christian group, maybe a Asian group, maybe a general group where we can all mingle, maybe a fun group, just a picnic group, maybe a group where we have, food together, and then DEI training to foster cultural sensitivity. So people know, people of Asian culture, very often we don't tell our stories, right? So it's not in settings. Then celebrations help. Then resource translations. For my mother-in-law, I had to really translate to Hindi. And all of these that I've talked about, storytelling, representation, and addressing vulnerable populations, the kids, the youth who lose hope. And especially in the US right now, we are really, really focusing on the kids because they're losing hope. And then focusing on the elderly, focusing on rural communities, focusing on the disabled. And for us, currently in the US, focusing on the trans and the gender diverse community and fighting for them every inch of the way with love. And then local and intentional partnerships. Now, this is preaching to the choir, but to be an ally, we are wearing our rainbows everywhere. My bag has, visible LGBTQ ally. We are finding a way around. We are getting involved. We are encouraging people to get involved. We are using inclusive language. We don't say ladies and gentlemen. We say everybody. We ask not how's your husband, we ask how's your partner. And we are trying. If we make a mistake, and sometimes we do, we apologize and move on. We are using pronouns. We are trying to, learn pronouns. We repair harm. And, sometimes we code switch. Everybody knows, like, in some communities, we have to be different people, right? With my mom-in-law, I have to use a different accent for her to understand, but my accent is anyway very Indian. And then, it's impact versus intention. We try to have the best intention, and sometimes we'll make mistakes. So we just want to do no harm. The rule is we treat people how they want to be treated, right? So respect isn't about treating people how we want to be treated, how they want to be treated. So using names, setting boundaries, and this is all at individual level. It translates to queer rights globally because it all starts with the self. We honor privacy. And what we've seen is that even one affirming adult can reduce the incidence of suicide by 40%. We are losing kids. The beginning of this year, I lost my friend's trans kid, died by suicide. Then their partner attempted suicide. It's happening for those of us who work in this advocacy field. There is so much grief. There is, it has to be then spirituality and faith that grounds us again and again and again. And then when we are meditating, my guru says that even when 1% of the population meditates, it can bring peace. And so we meditate every day. And now this is Alok Menon, conformity requires us to minimize our differences for the greater good. We fear that if we don't conform, we will be abandoned, but there is no loneliness, like having people only see you after you've erased yourself. So for me, I tell the kids who come to me, know yourself and be yourself. And we are there to support you. Our love is louder than any hate you'll encounter. That's all I have to say.